I just traveled to Glasgow after I've been in Edinburgh after the last few days. And in this video, I want to go through my first impressions of experiencing Glasgow and Scotland as a whole. I'm from Canada. It's my first time over here. I have spent some time in London and other parts of the UK, but my first time in Scotland. So in this video, I want to talk about the cost, my experience, my thoughts and opinions on Glasgow as a city. So without further ado, let's get into the video. All right, welcome back to the Lifting Nomad. My name is Alex, and if you are new here, my channel is all about traveling with a little bit of fitness content as well. I really focus on trying to live a balanced lifestyle while getting to enjoy the places that I've been over the last few years. Quick context, kind of set the stage before we get into this video. I'm from Canada, but I've traveled to like 25-ish countries over the last 3 years, mostly through South America and Europe. I climbed Patagonia down in Argentina. I did the hot air balloons over the Los Pirineos de Teotihuacan in La Ciudad de Mexico. I've been to Croatia, Ireland, Paris, Denmark, Iceland, Egypt, kind of all over the place. So I'd like to say I'm fairly well traveled and familiar with what to expect from cities. And culturally as well, like the UK and Canada and Australia tend to be fairly similar in the cultures and approaches to things. Obviously, each of our countries has its own little nuances, but they tend to be very similar cultural and upbringing experiences. And we tend to, when we travel, get along very well, and it feels very like at home. So with that being said, let's talk about Glasgow. So first things first, I think it's important to understand like when I was coming to the city, as obviously that does affect what kind of experience you're gonna have. It does get cold in the summers, it gets even colder in the winters. So with that being said, I was here in July of 2024, which is generally the warmest it will get in Scotland. I was also here during the Euros, so I think that's important and worth mentioning because of that. There's a lot of hype and a lot of people going out to pubs to watch matches. And it's also generally their peak tourist season during this time. But it is worth mentioning, especially before we get into this, in Glasgow, there is a massive student population that does skew the city population quite a lot during the school year. For reference, there's 5 universities actually within like Glasgow or Glasgow proper: University of Glasgow, University of Strathclyde, Glasgow Caledonian, the Glasgow School of Art, as well as the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. I'm not sure I'm saying that right, but they estimate approximately 180,000 students are comprised of these schools that Glasgow has, which is a fairly substantial amount that likely skews my experience that I was coming here during the summer. Now, this is also the peak tourist season for Glasgow. So in my mind, I was kind of thinking that the offset of the students would maybe be, reciprocated by the new number of tourists coming in. So with that being said, I booked a hotel in the Merchant City, kind of the city center, very, very close to the bus stop and the train stop. I think it's like Buchanan Street bus station. And then the downtown Queen Street train location for Glasgow. That's where I ended up training into. I got there from a train from Edinburgh. It took about 45 or 50 minutes, I want to say, from when I left Edinburgh to get to Glasgow. And then I just walked from there to my hotel. It took about 5 minutes. So the train station is very, very central to like the city center of Glasgow. I was staying in the Revolver Hotel, and I did want to preface this as part of this video. I would not recommend this place for absolutely anyone to stay. I had a private room there, which, I understand privates in like a hostel typically aren't as good as like a hotel. So you did have to have a communal shower down the hall, which is fairly common. I'm not used to that, where you're going into like a co-ed bathroom to shower and use the bathroom. But the problem was, first of all, the beds were the worst beds I've ever stayed in a hotel or a hostel. And the major problem was it's literally above a nightclub in Merchant City that's open until 4 or 5 a.m. 7 nights a week. So I was there a Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday, and Wednesday night, like the least busy nights you would think in a city. And it was just absolutely the loudest thing I've ever seen. Like even with earplugs, even with a fan in my face blowing on full blast, trying to create white noise, I physically could not sleep. Like it was giving me deliria, the amount of time that I had to sleep over 4 days. I think I had a cumulative amount of like 6 hours total. It was really, really sad because I think it definitely tarnished my opinion of the city because I was just grouchy and tired all the time. So I would just say do not stay in this hotel. no matter what. Now, that being said, let's talk about the neighborhood I was in. Merchant City, like I said, is like the city center or the downtown of Glasgow. And around there's quite a lot of like shopping and pubs and restaurants and some of the higher end places as well. So just walking around, it felt very, it felt very safe in a sense, but I will say it did feel a little bit edgier than Edinburgh. Like I said at the beginning, I've traveled to a lot of edgier, less safe cities. So I'd like to think I have a pretty good instinct and a good gut feeling for a place that's safe, maybe a place that's not. And it still felt safe, but I definitely felt a little bit more on edge simply because there wasn't many people around. It's a little bit difficult to explain in hindsight, but just even walking around on the streets, it was fairly barren. And keep in mind, this is during Euros. This was when matches were being played basically every night at like 7 or 8 p.m. And in my hometown of Toronto, during those matches, they're going to be completely full. Like pubs are going to be full. There's going to be people out and about watching these matches. So it just kind of felt a little weird to not see people out and about watching them because of the Euros. I get Scotland was out. I understand that. But just like watching sports in a pub, in my mind, is a very normal thing for people in their 20s. And I just didn't see anyone there. Now, that being said, after talking to some of the locals and asking around, they said that part of the city is very, very student driven, and a lot of people come in for their work shifts and then just leave. Not a lot of people actually stay and go out in the Merchant City, like downtown area. So that probably could have explained it. But with that said, I did go to a match at a pub in Merchant Square, which is this kind of like really cool indoor mall sort of feel with patios indoors. I thought this was one of the coolest places I've seen. They had individual booths with TVs in them. So it's kind of like you're watching it like exclusively just for you and your friends, but you're at a bar doing it. So even though I didn't meet a lot of people in this area, I thought this particular thing, Merchant Square, was well worth checking out if you are in Glasgow. Like I said, after chatting with some of the locals and getting to know the area a little bit better, they did recommend some of the places on the west end, particularly something like Ashton Lane or Ashton Road. I guess there's a lot of pubs and bars that are really, really popular for younger people, and people are going out there more likely than where I was in Merchant City. So I ended up going over there on a Wednesday night. It was much busier than Merchant City. I would imagine on the weekends it was going to be like popping off, but like I said, I was only there for a few days. And my experience there of going out on like the off-peak nights, I'm comparing it to like, let's say Dublin or even Edinburgh, where you could find something to do. Like there was always something going on, especially in the Europe summers. Tourists go there, they go on pub crawls, they go out 7 nights a week during the summer. You usually can find something to do. And candidly, in Glasgow, I did have a hard time finding something to do on these off nights. Again, I'm not talking trash about Glasgow. This was just my experience there coming in the peak of tourist season, expecting a little bit different than what I had. Now, I will say though, Glasgow was a great starting point to go to some places like mainly the Highlands, if you are going up to like the Isle of Skye, things like that. I started in Glasgow and then went up into the Highlands through Loch Lomond, Loch Restil, and ended up going to Inverary as well, which is a pretty popular, kind of cute little town up in the Highlands. There's like the Inverary Castle, which is a very popular destination for people to go visit. Interestingly enough, when we were there, we were told that there's no trespass law in Scotland. So even though the Inverary Castle was closed that day, we were told to just go around the gate and walk up onto the property. Obviously, like not break into the castle itself, but like just walking on the property and checking it out. And it was pretty cool. If you are in Inverary at all, I would definitely go check out the castle. The town itself, very small, very cute, very quaint. Not a whole lot to do here. I think there's like one hotel and a few restaurants, but for what it was, you're right on like one of the locks, and it was beautiful for what it's worth. After that, I went up to Oban, which is kind of getting up into the Tyre Highlands along the west coast of Scotland there. And Oban was a kind of a cool little town too, a little bit bigger than Inverary. And they also had the Oban Distillery, which is where I did my first whiskey tasting while I was in Scotland. And it was awesome. If you are anywhere close to Oban, I loved this distillery. I thought the whiskeys they had were incredible. I ended up having a Lagavulin that was aged in tequila casks. And me being a tequila person myself, I thought it was incredible. Very, very worth it. Super cute little town. Food was good. Vibes were good. Obviously, the weather is not ideal basically anywhere in Scotland, but at the same time, I did have a lot of fun there. After Oban, kind of came back to Glasgow through Glencoe and the Three Sisters, which is pretty popular in, there's a lot of movies and scenes been filmed there. Hagrid's Hut from Prisoner of Azkaban, The road in Skyfall when he drives like the Aston Martin back to his like childhood home, that's right there. The TV show Outlander, a lot of it's filmed in here. There's a lot of like really famous movies and TV shows filmed in this area. So it was beautiful. It was gorgeous. These are some of the coolest mountains and like nature experiences I've seen. So if you are going into Glasgow, I would say take some of the nature up in the Highlands. You're there already, basically. It's not too far. Go check it out. You're not going to regret it. Now, finally, just like talking about the cost a little bit, it was very similar to Edinburgh, almost identical, I would say. I think for my hostel private, I paid, I want to say like 110 or 120 Canadian dollars a night for a double bed, like private room, which is pretty standard table stakes for like a short-term stay in a cheaper hotel or cheaper hostel. Beers in restaurants were, I would say, like £6 to £8, which, you know, you can convert that for yourself. Food, I would say on average like 15 to 20 pounds, unless you're getting just like breakfast. So it, you know, it is fairly expensive overall, but it was, you know, no different in my mind than Edinburgh costs. So overall, I would say like as a tourist destination, like this is not to stay long-term, just to visit. Glasgow was okay. I had fun, but personally, if I was going to go back and do this trip again, I would just stick to Edinburgh. I think it had everything that Glasgow had, but then just a little bit more to do, a little bit more going on. So while I'm there on holiday, I like to have things to do. I like to have options. So for me, Edinburgh was a better time. Don't kill me. So that's going to be the video. Hopefully this was useful to learn a little bit about my experience in Glasgow, and you can decide whether this was useful or not, and whether you want to go check out Glasgow in Scotland. So if it was, feel free to leave a like or comment in the section below. Always helps the algorithm. As always, my name is Alex. Welcome back to Lifting Nomad. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.